I don't know who I'm speaking to today, but somebody here has been facing closed doors. You've knocked, you've waited, you've prayed, but the doors remain shut. You've tried to make things work, but every opportunity seems to slip away. You're standing in front of barriers that refuse to move. And maybe, just maybe, you've started to believe the lie that says, this is it. There's no way forward. But let me tell you something today. Closed doors are not the end of your story. Closed doors are not God's rejection. Sometimes they are His redirection. And if every door in front of you is closed, then maybe, just maybe, it's time to break through. Closed doors are not the end. They are an invitation to something greater. Too often we treat a closed door like a full stop, like the final chapter of our story. But what if God never meant for you to stop? What if He's calling you to push forward? Do you remember the story of the 4 men who carried their paralyzed friend to Jesus, Mark 2:12? They were desperate to get him healed. But when they arrived at the house, the door was closed. The house was so full they couldn't get in. Now, they could have given up. They could have said, maybe it's not God's will. But do you know what they did? They broke through the roof. They refused to let a closed door stop them from getting to Jesus. They made a way where there was no way. And what happened? Jesus saw their faith, healed their friend, and forgave his sins. Some of you today are standing outside of a house looking at a closed door, wondering what to do next. Listen to me. If the door is closed, find another way in. If you can't walk through the door, climb through the roof. God never leaves you without a way. Sometimes He wants you to create one. Some people wait for opportunities to come to them. But sometimes God doesn't bring the opportunity to you. He wants you to step out and take it. Remember when Israel stood before the Red Sea, Pharaoh's army was behind them, the sea was in front of them, and they had nowhere to go. But did God say, turn back? No. He told Moses, lift your staff. And when Moses obeyed, the sea parted. Sometimes God won't open the way until you move in faith. Some of you are waiting on God, but God is waiting on you. Obstacles are just stepping stones for the faithful. Every time you face a barrier, you have 2 choices: to be stopped by it or to step over it. David could have looked at Goliath and said, he's too big to fight. But instead, he looked at Goliath and said, he's too big to miss. What if your biggest obstacle is actually your greatest opportunity? Faith is more than waiting. It's moving even when you can't see the path. Faith is not passive. Faith is active. The Bible says faith without works is dead. James 2, verse 26, if you believe God has a plan, then why are you standing still? Fear will tell you to stop, but God calls you to push forward. Fear will tell you that the door is locked. Fear will tell you that you're not strong enough to break through. Fear will tell you to turn around and give up. But listen to me. Fear is a liar. If fear is standing between you and your breakthrough, then it's time to break the spirit of fear. Every great story has a moment of resistance before the breakthrough. Before Israel reached the promised land, they faced the wilderness. Before David became king, he had to fight giants and run from Saul. Before Jesus rose from the grave, he had to go through the cross. Breakthrough always comes after resistance. Your breakthrough might not look like what you expected. Some of you are expecting God to open a specific door, but what if He's opening something completely different? The disciples expected Jesus to be a political king, but instead He gave them an eternal kingdom. Don't limit what God can do just because it doesn't look the way you imagine. Sometimes you have to break before you can break through. Sometimes God allows things to break so He can build something new. A seed has to break before it can grow. A caterpillar has to struggle before it can become a butterfly. And sometimes God allows you to go through hardship to prepare you for what's coming next. What is impossible for man is possible with God. When all human options are gone, that's when God shows up. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego had no way out of the fire, but God was in the fire with them. If God is for you, nothing can stand against you. When you move in faith, God moves mountains. Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. You don't need to know how it will happen. You don't need to have all the answers. You just need faith. If God gave you a dream, don't stop now. If all doors are closed, it's time to break through. I don't know what barriers you're facing today. I don't know what closed doors are in front of you, but I do know this: your breakthrough is coming. If you step out in faith, if you refuse to give up, if you trust that God has a plan for your life, then I promise you the doors that were once locked will open, the walls that were once unmovable will fall, and the breakthrough you've been waiting for will come. Don't wait for doors to open. If God is calling you forward, it's time to break through. Closed doors are not the end. They are an invitation to something greater. Have you ever faced a situation where every door seemed to be shut? You knocked, you waited, you prayed, and yet nothing seemed to open. Maybe it was a job you desperately wanted but didn't get. Maybe it was a relationship you fought for, but it still fell apart. Maybe it was a dream you worked toward, but no matter how hard you tried, the opportunity never came. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like you've hit a dead end. It's easy to think, maybe this is it, maybe I'm not supposed to go any further. But let me tell you something today. Closed doors are not the end of your story. Too often we treat a closed door as a full stop when God only intended it to be a redirection. When one door closes, God isn't trying to limit you. He's trying to lead you. He's shifting you, protecting you, and preparing you for something greater than what you had in mind. Think about a child who wants to touch a hot stove. To the child, that stove looks interesting. It looks like something they should be able to reach for. But the parent steps in and closes that door, not to be cruel, not to take away something good, but to protect them from something they don't yet understand. How many times in our lives has God done the same for us? How many times have we seen a door close and thought, God, why would you take this away from me? When in reality, He was saving us from something we didn't see coming. Think about Joseph in the Bible. Joseph had a dream that he would one day be a great leader. But instead of stepping into leadership immediately, he faced one closed door after another. His brothers betrayed him. He was thrown into a pit. He was sold into slavery. He was falsely accused and imprisoned. Every step of the way, it looked like doors were slamming shut in his face. But what Joseph didn't know was that every closed door was leading him to something greater. If he had never been betrayed, he would have never ended up in Egypt. If he had never been imprisoned, he would have never met the cupbearer. If he had never met the cupbearer, he would have never been called before Pharaoh. And if he had never been called before Pharaoh, he would have never stepped into the position God had prepared for him all along. The closed doors were never a sign that God had abandoned him. They were proof that God was leading him. And the same is true for you. Some of you have been standing in front of a closed door, crying over what didn't work out, feeling stuck because things didn't go the way you expected. But what if God is using that closed door to redirect you to something greater? Sometimes the reason the door is closed is because you're meant to go higher. A bird doesn't enter a house by walking through a door. It soars above it. And sometimes God allows doors to close because He's not calling you to go through them. He's calling you to rise above them. And sometimes God closes a door because He has a better one waiting. Imagine a little girl holding onto a small broken toy. She loves that toy, even though it's falling apart. And her father comes to her and says, "Give it to me. I have something better for you." But she hesitates. She can't see what's coming next. All she sees is what she's losing. Some of you today are holding on to something God has asked you to let go of. A relationship, a job, a dream, a plan that you thought was perfect. And God is saying, "Trust me, if you only knew what I had prepared for you, you would let this go with joy." Closed doors don't mean the story is over. They mean the author is still writing. So today, if you're facing a closed door, don't see it as a defeat. See it as an invitation. An invitation to trust, to believe, to step into something even greater than what you had planned. Because when God closes a door, it's never to leave you empty. It's always to lead you to something better. God never leaves you without a way. Sometimes He wants you to create one. Have you ever felt like you've reached a dead end, like every road you take leads to another wall? Maybe you've been searching for answers, praying for direction, and yet all you see are obstacles. It's in those moments that doubt begins to creep in. You start to wonder, did God forget about me? Did He bring me this far just to leave me here? But let me remind you today, God never leaves you without a way. Sometimes we expect God to open every door for us. We expect Him to lay out a smooth path, free of challenges. But what if the breakthrough isn't about waiting for God to make a way? What if He's calling you to step out in faith and create one? Think about Moses and the Israelites standing at the edge of the Red Sea. Behind them, Pharaoh's army was closing in, and in front of them was a body of water that seemed impossible to cross. They were trapped. From a human perspective, there was no way forward. But God didn't say, just stand there and accept defeat. No, He said to Moses, lift up your staff and stretch out your hand over the sea. Moses had to take action before the miracle happened. The sea didn't part while they stood still. The sea parted when Moses obeyed. Some of you are waiting for the waters to part before you move. But maybe, just maybe, God is waiting for you to take a step of faith first. Think about the story of the 4 men who carried their paralyzed friend to Jesus. They arrived at the house where Jesus was teaching, expecting to walk right in and get their friend healed, but the house was packed, the door was blocked, there was no way in. Most people would have stopped there. Most people would have turned around and said, well, I guess it's not meant to be. But not these men. Instead of giving up, they got creative. They climbed up onto the roof, made a hole, and lowered their friend down right in front of Jesus. They didn't let a blocked door stop them. They created a way where there was no way. And what did Jesus do? The Bible says when Jesus saw their faith, Mark 2:05, He didn't just see their persistence, He saw their faith. And because of that faith, the paralyzed man was healed. What if those men had waited for the door to magically open? What if they had walked away assuming it wasn't God's timing? Some of you today are facing blocked doors, and instead of pushing forward, you're waiting for them to open on their own. But faith is not about waiting for the perfect conditions. Faith is about trusting that God has already provided everything you need to make a way. Sometimes your miracle is on the other side of your movement. Imagine a farmer who has seeds in his hands. He can stare at those seeds and pray for a harvest all day long, but if he never plants them, nothing will grow. Some of you are holding seeds, gifts, talents, ideas, opportunities, but you're waiting for God to do everything for you. But God is saying, I've already given you what you need. It's time to plant. It's time to move. It's time to take action. Remember, when Jesus healed the blind man, he didn't just snap his fingers and restore his sight. He spit on the ground, made mud, and put it on the man's eyes. Then he told him, go, wash in the pool of Siloam, John 9:7. The man had to go and wash before he could see. What does that tell us? It tells us that sometimes the breakthrough comes after the obedience. Think about Noah. God told him to build an ark before there was ever a drop of rain. If Noah had waited for proof, he would have drowned with the rest of the world. But he believed, he acted in faith. He built a way of escape before the storm ever came. God always provides a way. But sometimes that way requires you to step out in faith and take action. So today, if you feel like every door is closed, don't stand there waiting for an answer to fall from the sky. Ask yourself, what has God already placed in my hands? Has He given you a vision, a gift, a talent, a dream? Then use it. Move forward. Knock on doors. Climb through windows if you have to. Break through the roof if necessary. Because one thing is certain, God never leaves His people without a way. But sometimes He wants you to step out in faith and create one. Obstacles are not stop signs. They are tests of your determination. Life has a way of placing obstacles in front of us just when we think we're making progress. You probably experienced this yourself. You start working towards something important and suddenly a problem arises. A financial setback, a health issue, a rejection, a betrayal. Something happens that makes you question whether you should even keep going. And in those moments, it's easy to believe that the obstacle means stop. It's easy to think maybe this isn't meant to be. Maybe this is a sign that I should quit. But let me tell you today, obstacles are not stop signs, they are tests. They are there to prove how badly you want what you are pursuing. Look at any great achievement in history and you will see that the people who succeeded were not the ones who had an easy path. They were the ones who refused to quit when things got tough. Think about Thomas Edison. He didn't invent the light bulb in one try. It took him over 1,000 attempts before he finally succeeded. When asked about his failures, he didn't say, I failed 1,000 times. Instead, he said, I found 1,000 ways that didn't work. What if he had stopped at attempt number 500? What if he had given up at 999? The world would have been left in darkness. Some of you today are facing obstacles, and you're thinking about giving up. You've tried, you've prayed, you've pushed forward, but you're tired. And you're starting to wonder if it's even worth it. But let me tell you, the obstacle is not there to stop you. It's there to see if you are willing to fight for what you say you want. Think about David in the Bible. When he stood before Goliath, he didn't see a giant as an obstacle. He saw an opportunity. Everyone else was terrified. They saw an enemy that was too big to fight. But David saw an enemy that was too big to miss. David understood that the obstacle in front of him was not a sign to turn around. It was a test to see if he truly trusted in the power of God. And because David stepped forward instead of backing down, he stepped into his destiny. The same applies to you. The struggles you're facing today, the difficulties, the setbacks, the disappointments, they are not there to stop you. They are there to refine you, to strengthen you, and to prepare you for what's coming next. Imagine a goldsmith refining gold. When gold is first mined, it's filled with impurities. It doesn't look valuable, but the goldsmith doesn't throw it away. He puts it in the fire. And the fire is what purifies the gold, burning away everything that doesn't belong. Right now, some of you are in the fire. You're facing hardships, and you feel like you can't take any more heat. But let me tell you, the fire isn't there to destroy you. It's there to refine you. If gold had feelings, it would probably say, why am I going through this? Why is it so hot in here? But if it could see what was coming, it would understand that the fire is creating something valuable. The very obstacle that feels like it's breaking you is actually the thing that's preparing you for your next level. Look at the story of the woman with the issue of blood in Mark 5. For 12 years she suffered. She had spent everything she had looking for a cure, but nothing worked. Every door had been closed to her, but she refused to stop. She could have said, I've tried everything. It's no use. But instead she said, if I can just touch the hem of his garment, I will be healed. She pressed through the crowd. She pushed past every obstacle in her way. And because she didn't give up, she received her miracle. What if she had given up at year 10? What if she had decided she was too tired to fight anymore? Some of you are at your breaking point. You've been trying for years and it feels like nothing is changing. But what if your breakthrough is just one step away? What if the obstacle in front of you is not there to stop you, but to test you? God doesn't call us to an easy life. He calls us to a life of faith, of persistence, of endurance. And those who push through the obstacles, those who refuse to quit, those are the ones who see the fulfillment of His promises. So today, if you're facing a giant, don't turn around. If you're walking through fire, don't give up. If every door seems closed, keep knocking, because obstacles are not stop signs, they are tests. And those who pass the test will see the reward. Breakthrough happens when you refuse to settle for less. There comes a moment in life when you have to decide, are you going to settle or are you going to push through? Because the truth is, too many people settle for less than what God has for them. They settle for a mediocre life, an unfulfilled dream, an ordinary existence. Not because they weren't meant for more, but because they stopped believing there was more. But breakthrough happens when you refuse to settle. Think about the story of Jacob in Genesis 32. He had spent his entire life running from his past, running from his mistakes, running from his brother Esau. But one night when he was all alone, he had an encounter that would change his life forever. The Bible says he wrestled with an angel until the breaking of day. Now Jacob could have let go. He could have said, this is too hard, I'm tired. I'll just accept my life the way it is. But he didn't. Instead, he clung to the angel and said, I will not let you go unless you bless me. Genesis 32:26. That moment changed everything. Because Jacob refused to settle, because he refused to let go, God changed his name, changed his identity, changed his destiny. He walked into that encounter as Jacob, the deceiver, but he walked away as Israel, the one who prevailed. Your breakthrough is on the other side of your persistence. It's on the other side of your fight. But you have to want it badly enough to refuse to settle. Too many people give up right before their moment of victory. They pray for a while, they work for a while, they push for a while, but when things get tough, when answers don't come immediately, they accept a lesser version of what they were meant for. But God didn't call you to a lesser life. He didn't create you for mediocrity. He didn't place a dream in your heart for you to stop halfway. Look at blind Bartimaeus in Mark 10. He was sitting by the roadside when he heard that Jesus was passing by. And he shouted, Jesus, Son of David, have mercy on me. Now, here's where most people stop. The crowd around him told him to be quiet. They told him to settle. They told him to accept his situation. But Bartimaeus didn't listen. The Bible says he cried out even more, Mark 10:48. And because he refused to settle, because he refused to stay silent, Jesus stopped. Think about that. His persistence made Jesus stop. And in that moment, his life was changed forever. Some of you are facing resistance right now. People are telling you to quit. The enemy is whispering that it's no use, that nothing will change, that you might as well accept things the way they are. But let me tell you today, don't settle. Don't accept a life that is less than what God has promised you. Look at the woman with the issue of blood. For 12 years, she suffered. For 12 years, she was told there was no cure, no hope, no future. She could have accepted that. She could have said, this is just my life. This is how things are. But she didn't. Instead, she pushed through the crowd. She reached out and touched the hem of Jesus' garment. And in that moment, she was healed. Her breakthrough came because she refused to settle for sickness. She refused to settle for suffering. She refused to let her circumstances define her. What about you? What are you settling for? A job that drains you? A relationship that isn't God's best? A mindset that tells you this is just how life is? You were made for more, but you have to believe it enough to fight for it. The enemy wants you to settle. He wants you to give up. He wants you to stop believing that things can change, because if he can get you to settle, he can stop you from stepping into your destiny. But today I want to challenge you. Refuse to accept defeat. Refuse to believe that this is as good as it gets. Refuse to let fear, doubt, or discouragement keep you from pressing forward, because breakthrough belongs to those who refuse to settle. Faith opens doors that hard work alone cannot. There's something powerful about faith, something that goes beyond human effort, beyond talent, beyond intelligence. We live in a world that tells us that if we just work hard enough, if we just push long enough, we will succeed. And while hard work is important, faith is the key that unlocks doors that hard work alone cannot. Faith moves mountains that strength cannot. Faith opens doors that seem permanently shut. Think about Noah. When God told him to build an ark, it had never rained before. The people around him must have thought he was crazy. They must have laughed at him, mocked him, told him he was wasting his time. But Noah had faith. He kept building when there was no sign of rain. He kept trusting when nothing made sense. And because of his faith, he and his family were saved. Now imagine if Noah had relied on human logic instead of faith. He would have said, there's no point in this. There's no proof that rain is coming. I'll just wait until I see something happen before I start building. But that's not how faith works. Faith moves first. Faith believes before it sees. And because Noah acted in faith, he walked through a door that no amount of human effort could have opened. The same applies to you. There are some doors in your life that will only open when you move in faith. There are some opportunities, some breakthroughs, some miracles that will only come when you trust God more than you trust your circumstances. Look at Peter in Matthew 14. He was in a boat with the other disciples when they saw Jesus walking on water, and Peter, filled with faith, said, "Lord, if it's you, tell me to come to you on the water." Now, at that moment, Peter had two choices. He could have stayed in the boat where it was safe, where it made sense, where logic said he belonged. Or he could step out in faith, and we all know what happened. He walked on water. Think about that. Peter did something that was impossible, not because he was strong, not because he was talented, but because he had faith. But what happened next? He started looking at the wave. He started focusing on the wind, on the storm, on everything that was coming against him. And the moment he took his eyes off Jesus, he began to sink. That's what happens when we replace faith with fear. Some of you are standing at the edge of something God has called you to do. He's asking you to step out, to trust Him, to believe for something bigger. But you're looking at the waves, you're looking at the reasons it won't work, the reasons you might fail, the reasons it's too risky. And because of that, you're still in the boat. But let me ask you this. Do you want to stay where it's safe, or do you want to walk on water? Because faith opens doors. Faith opened the prison doors for Paul and Silas when they worshiped in chains. Faith opened the Red Sea for Moses when all hope seemed lost. Faith brought down the walls of Jericho when Joshua and his people marched in obedience. And faith will open doors in your life too, but only if you step out. You may have been knocking on doors that won't open. You may have been trying to force something to happen in your own strength, relying only on your effort, your wisdom, your resources, and it feels like nothing is working. But have you added faith? Have you trusted God beyond what you can see? Because faith makes a way where there is no way. When the Israelites were trapped between Pharaoh's army and the Red Sea, there was no human solution. There was no effort, no strategy, no strength that could save them. But Moses didn't panic. He trusted God, and because of his faith, God split the sea. Some of you today are standing at your own Red Sea. You see no way out. Every door seems closed. Every option seems impossible. But let me tell you, faith will open the door. The question is, will you trust God enough to step out? Obstacles are not the end, they are the beginning of something greater. There's something about obstacles that makes most people want to give up. When things get hard, when the road gets blocked, when everything seems to be against them, people start thinking, maybe this isn't meant for me. Maybe I should just stop. But what if I told you that obstacles are not the end, they are the beginning of something greater? Every person who has ever done something great had to face obstacles. The difference between those who succeed and those who fail is simple. Some see obstacles as a stop sign, while others see them as a test of faith. Look at Joseph in the Bible. He had a dream that one day he would be a great leader. But the moment he shared that dream, he faced his first obstacle. His own brothers hated him. They didn't just mock him or ignore him. They threw him into a pit and sold him into slavery. Now, Joseph could have thought, well, that's it. My dream is over. My life is ruined. But he didn't. Even as a slave, he remained faithful. Even in prison, he held on to hope. And in the end, the very obstacles that were meant to destroy him positioned him for his destiny. Had his brothers never sold him, he would never have ended up in Egypt. Had he never been falsely accused, he would never have been in prison. And had he never been in prison, he would never have been in the right place to interpret Pharaoh's dream, the very moment that made him second in command over all of Egypt. What does that tell us? The obstacle is not the end, it's part of the process. Sometimes we pray for God to remove obstacles when in reality, those obstacles are the very thing God is using to push us into our destiny. Think about David when he was just a shepherd boy. No one paid attention to him. No one thought he would ever be great. But then one day a giant showed up. Now most people saw Goliath as a problem. They saw him as an obstacle. But David saw him as an opportunity. You see, before Goliath, David was just a shepherd. But after Goliath, he became a warrior, a hero, a future king. The very thing that was supposed to destroy him became the thing that elevated him. What if the obstacle you are facing right now is not there to stop you, but to promote you? What if the rejection, the failure, the hardship is actually preparing you for something greater? Too often we let obstacles define us. We think if things were meant to work out, they would be easier, but that's not how faith works. Obstacles don't mean God is against you. They mean He's training you. Imagine a butterfly trying to break out of its cocoon. The struggle looks painful, difficult, almost impossible. But scientists have found that if you try to help the butterfly by cutting the cocoon open, it will never develop strong wings. The struggle is what makes it able to fly. And it's the same with you. If you never faced obstacles, you would never grow strong enough to handle the blessings God has for you. If everything came easy, you would never learn persistence, faith, and that's why James 1:2-3 says, "Consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance." Think about Thomas Edison. He failed over 1,000 times before he invented the light bulb, but when asked about it, he didn't say, "I failed 1,000 times." He said, "I found 1,000 ways that didn't work." That's the mindset of someone who understands that obstacles are not the end. What about you? What obstacles are you facing today? Are you going to let them stop you, or are you going to see them as part of the process? Because if you refuse to quit, if you keep going despite the challenges, if you see obstacles as opportunities, then you will find that every closed door, every hardship, every setback is actually a setup for something greater. Your mindset determines your breakthrough. Everything in life begins with how you think. Your mindset determines whether you move forward or stay stuck, whether you rise or fall, whether you succeed or give up. Before any battle is won in life, it must first be won in the mind. Many people think their circumstances are the biggest problem in their lives. They believe that if they had more money, a better opportunity, or a different background, they could achieve more. The truth is, your greatest battle is not against your circumstances. It is against the way you think. Look at the Israelites when they were freed from Egypt. God had delivered them from slavery. He parted the Red Sea for them. He provided manna from heaven. But when it was time to step into the promised land, they let their mindset hold them back. They sent spies to look at the land. And even though God had promised it to them, 10 of the 12 spies came back saying, "We can't take the land. The people there are too big. We are like grasshoppers in our own eyes." Numbers 13:33. Think about that. They didn't just say the enemy was big. They said, "We are like grasshoppers in our own eyes." Their problem wasn't that their enemies were strong. Their problem was that they saw themselves as weak. And because of their mindset, they missed out on their breakthrough. This is what happens when you let negative thinking take control. God may have a promise for you, but if you keep telling yourself, "I can't do it, I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I don't have what it takes," then you will never step into what God has for you. But then there were two men, Joshua and Caleb, who saw the same land, the same giants, the same obstacles, yet they had a different mindset. They said, "We can take this land because God is with us." And do you know what happened? The entire generation that doubted died in the wilderness. But Joshua and Caleb lived to see the promised land. Why? Because your mindset determines your breakthrough. You see this same principle in the story of David and Goliath. The entire army of Israel saw Goliath and said, "He is too big to fight." But David looked at Goliath and said, "He is too big to miss." Same giant, different mindset. Your perspective on life shapes your reality. If you believe that you are defeated, that life is against you, that nothing will ever change, then that is exactly what will happen. But if you believe that God is with you, that He has given you the strength to overcome, that no obstacle is too great for His power, then you will see breakthroughs that others only dream about. Look at the story of the woman with the issue of blood in Mark 5. For 12 years she suffered. For 12 years she spent all she had on doctors, but instead of getting better, she got worse. She could have let her situation define her. She could have said, "This is just my life. I will always be sick." But she changed her mindset. She said to herself, "If I can just touch the hem of Jesus' garment, I will be healed." And because she believed it, she acted on it. She pushed through the crowd, touched Jesus, and in an instant she was healed. Jesus turned to her and said, "Daughter, Your faith has made you well. Her mindset, her belief led to her breakthrough. What about you? Are you letting negative thoughts hold you back? Are you letting fear, doubt, and insecurity keep you from stepping into what God has for you? Or are you choosing to believe that God is bigger than your problems, that He has a plan for you, that nothing is impossible for Him? Because at the end of the day, your breakthrough isn't just about your circumstances, it's about your mindset. If you think like a victim, you will live like a victim. But if you think like a victor, you will live like a victor. So today I challenge you, change your mindset and watch how God changes your life. Failure is not final. It's a setup for a comeback. One of the biggest lies people believe is that failure is the end. They think that if they fail, it means they are not good enough, not talented enough, not strong enough. But let me tell you something. Failure is not final. It is not the end of the story. In fact, it is often just the beginning of something greater. Think about Peter. He was one of Jesus's closest disciple. He was bold, passionate, and always ready to act. But on the night Jesus was arrested, when the pressure was at its highest, Peter did something unthinkable. He denied Jesus 3 times. Can you imagine the guilt, the shame, the regret he must have felt? He had walked with Jesus, seen miracles firsthand, and yet in his weakest moment, he failed. Now, Peter could have let that failure define him. He could have said, I messed up too badly. God could never use me again. He could have walked away and never looked back. But do you know what happened? After Jesus was resurrected, he didn't reject Peter. He didn't remind him of his failure. Instead, he restored him. He gave him another chance. And on the day of Pentecost, it was Peter, the same man who had denied Jesus, who stood up and preached to thousands. That day, 3,000 people came to Christ. What does that tell us? Failure is not the end. It's often the very thing God uses to prepare you for your greatest moments. Too many people let failure stop them. They try something, it doesn't work out, and they decide, I'll never try again. They let the disappointment, the embarrassment, the shame keep them from moving forward. But failure is not meant to stop you, it's meant to teach you. It's meant to grow you. It's meant to prepare you for your comeback. Look at Thomas Edison. He failed over 1,000 times before he successfully invented the light bulb. But he didn't see those failures as wasted effort. He said, I have not failed. I've just found 10,000 ways that won't work. That is the mindset of someone who understands that failure is part of the process. Michael Jordan, one of the greatest basketball players of all time, once said, I've missed more than 9,000 shots in my career. I've lost almost 300 games. 26 times I've been trusted to take the game-winning shot and missed. I've failed over and over again in my life, and that is why I succeed. What if he had quit after missing those shots? What if he had let failure define him? He never would have become the champion that he was. The same goes for you. Maybe you've tried something and it didn't work. Maybe you applied for the job and didn't get it. Maybe you started a business and it failed. Maybe you stepped out in faith and things didn't go as planned. And now the enemy is whispering, you should quit. You should give up. You'll never make it. But let me remind you, failure is not final. It's just part of your journey. Moses failed when he killed an Egyptian and had to flee into the wilderness. But that wasn't the end of his story. God still used him to deliver an entire nation. David failed when he fell into sin, but that wasn't the end of his story. God still called him a man after his own heart. Paul failed when he persecuted Christians, but that wasn't the end of his story. God still used him to write most of the New Testament. So what makes you think your failure is the end? God is not done with you. That setback you experienced, it's just a setup for a comeback. That failure, it's just another chapter in your testimony. So don't quit. Don't let failure define you. Rise up, learn from it, and move forward, because your greatest victory is still ahead. Faith opens doors that fear keeps shut. Every single one of us comes to a moment in life where we stand before a closed door. Maybe it's a job opportunity that didn't work out, a relationship that ended, a dream that seems impossible. And when we face these closed doors, we have two choices. We can either let fear paralyze us, or we can step forward in faith. Fear tells you to stop. Fear whispers, what if you fail? What if it doesn't work out? What if you're not good enough? Fear builds walls where God wants to open doors. But faith looks beyond the obstacle and sees the opportunity. Think about the story of the Israelites standing before the Red Sea. Behind them was Pharaoh's army coming to take them back into slavery. In front of them was a sea blocking their escape. Fear told them they were trapped. Fear told them to give up, but God said, move forward. And as they stepped forward in faith, the sea split before them. What does that tell us? The door won't always open until you take the first step. So many people stand in front of their Red Sea, waiting for God to do something. They say, God, if you just show me a sign, then I'll move. But God is saying, move, and I will make a way. Faith is what unlocks the impossible. Look at Peter walking on water. The storm was raging, the waves were crashing, but when Jesus called him, he stepped out of the boat. As long as his eyes were on Jesus, he did the impossible. But the moment he let fear creep in, he started to sink. That's what fear does. It drowns you in doubt. But faith lets you walk on what should have taken you under. Maybe right now you're standing in front of something that seems impossible. Maybe you're facing a situation where every door seems shut. Maybe you feel stuck, like you don't know what to do next. Let me remind you, God is not limited by closed doors. Joseph was thrown into prison, falsely accused, forgotten by people, but God had a plan. Joseph's faith never wavered, and when the time was right, God opened the door and made him second in command over Egypt. Daniel was thrown into a den of lions. That should have been the end of his story, but faith shut the mouths of lions. And the next morning, Daniel walked out. Paul and Silas were locked in a prison cell. It seemed like there was no way out. But instead of letting fear take over, they started to sing and praise God. And as they praised, the prison doors swung open. Do you see the pattern? Faith unlocks doors. Faith makes a way where there is no way. But you have to take the step. Maybe your faith is small. Maybe you're thinking, I don't know if I have enough faith for this. But Jesus said, if you have faith as small as a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move from here to there, and it will move. Matthew 17:20. You don't need to have it all figured out. You don't need to see the whole path ahead. You just need to take the first step in faith and trust that God will open the door. Fear will try to hold you back. It will try to convince you that the door is locked forever. But remember, fear is a liar. If God has called you to something, no man, no situation, no obstacle can keep you from it. The only thing that can stop you is fear. So today, make a decision. Choose faith over fear. Step forward and watch as God opens the doors that no man can shut. God's timing is perfect. Trust the process. One of the hardest things in life is waiting for a breakthrough, waiting for an opportunity, waiting for an answer to prayer. In those moments, it's easy to feel discouraged. It's easy to wonder, God, have you forgotten me? But let me remind you today, God's timing is perfect. Even when you can't see it, even when you don't understand it, He is working all things together for your good. Look at the story of Joseph. God gave him a dream that one day he would be a ruler, that he would be in a position of great authority. But instead of stepping into that promise immediately, Joseph's life took a different turn. He was betrayed by his own brothers, sold into slavery, falsely accused and thrown into prison, forgotten by those he helped. Year after year passed, and it seemed like his dreams were farther away than ever. If Joseph had focused only on his circumstances, he could have easily given up. He could have thought, maybe I heard God wrong, maybe that dream wasn't real. But what Joseph didn't see in the moment was that God was positioning him. Had Joseph gone straight from the dream to the palace, he wouldn't have been ready. He needed the process. He needed the lessons. He needed the refining that came from his trials. And when the time was right, not a moment too soon or too late, God brought him from the prison to the palace in a single day. What does that tell us? Delays are not denials. Just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean it won't happen. So many people miss out on their breakthrough because they give up too soon. They stop believing, stop trusting, stop waiting on God's timing. But the Bible says in Isaiah 40:31, those who wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. Waiting is not wasted time. Waiting is preparation time. Think about David. He was anointed as king when he was just a boy. But he didn't take the throne right away. He spent years in the wilderness running from King Saul, fighting battles, facing hardships. Why? Because God was shaping him into the king he was meant to be. If David had become king too soon, he wouldn't have been ready. But when the time was right, when he had been tested and refined, God fulfilled his promise. Maybe right now you feel like you're in a season of waiting. Maybe you've been praying, believing, holding on to a promise, but nothing seems to be happening. Let me encourage you. God is not ignoring you. He is preparing you. A delay is not a no. It's God's way of setting things up in His perfect timing. Think about a seed planted in the ground. You don't see growth immediately, but just because you can't see it doesn't mean nothing is happening. Beneath the surface, roots are forming, foundations are being set, and when the time is right, that seed will break through the ground and grow into something strong and fruitful. Your life is the same way. God is working beneath the surface. He is preparing you for something greater than you can imagine. So don't give up. Don't lose hope. Trust the process. Trust His timing. Because when the time is right, God will open the door. And when He does, you realize that every delay, every struggle, every season of waiting was worth it.